This happened to my junior year of high school and has almost forgot until my dad brought it up a couple of days ago. I figured I'd share as I found a screenshot related to this after my father reminded me. So, I live really close to a shopping center, like 3 minutes away. Before school, maybe once or twice a week, I'd stop to grab donuts or orange juice. I go to this store a lot, so I recognize a decent amount of employees. One day before school, I decided to stop by and grab donuts. The layout of the entrance is important. As you walk up to the doors, there's a huge set of shopping carts that an employee is normally working at by collecting carts from the parking lot. As you're walking away from the entrance and out of the store, if you turn left, you go into the main large parking lot. You can walk straight instead to the side of the building, where there are around 20 parking spots. There's an exit on the side of the building that's closer to my house and less crowded than the main road. And I drive a truck, so I used to park on that side. It's well lit, it has cameras next to another store, and many more. So I've never felt isolated there. Anyway, I park on the side like normal and walk into the store. As I pass the grocery carts in front of the doors, there's an employee there who I don't recognize. He says good morning to me and I say it back. Nothing weird. I go into the store and get my donuts, pay, and walk out. I see the guy again, and he's just staring at me. Okay, kinda weird, but I keep walking to my car. I get to the driver's side of my car, open it, hop in, set my food down on the passenger side, and turn to reach out and close the driver door. As I put my hand out, another hand stops the door from shutting, and the employee from earlier steps in between my door and I. Alarms are going off in my head. He asked what my name was, and I stupidly gave him my real name because I was panicking. My name is super common, such as Sarah. Not really my name, but as equally common. He asked for my phone number, and I said no. I have to get to school and I'm running late. He wouldn't take no for an answer and would not move. I gave him a fake number and he finally backs out of my door. I shut it immediately and take off. I got to the parking lot of my school and called my dad to tell him what happened and what the guy looked like, and he went down and reported it for me. I thought this was the end, but it got weirder. A couple days pass by, and I get a direct message on Instagram from this guy. No way he knows my last name, just my first, which is again, super common. I got this DM during my history class, in which we sat in groups of 4. I tell the people at my table what happened, and without bringing up what he looks like or his name, a girl at my table, also named Sarah, pulls his Instagram page up and asks if it's him. It was, and I asked how she knew. Apparently, he had DM'd her as well, and another girl in our class also named Sarah. I had 1 or 2 other friends with the same name, so I asked them if they got a DM from this guy too. And sure enough, they did. One of the girls with my name works at the store with him and said he was insanely creepy around her all the time, like following her to the break room and anytime she'd go in, finding excuses to be around her, switch shifts to work at the same time, asking her out every other shift. She tells us he was 21 at that time, which we were all 16 or 17, making it even creepier that he's going for all these high school girls with the same name. During lunch, I stayed in my history teacher's room with a couple of girls who got messages as well, and we explained to him what was going on. And he said to go to campus security and tell them, just to be sure that he isn't around the school. The girl who works with him went to report it, and that was that. My dad said the manager said that she would take care of it when he reported it. The girl who worked with him said she talked to the manager as well, and the guy ended up getting fired and a police report was made. But nothing could really be done since he hadn't done anything. So I have no clue how he found my Instagram, but our guess was he was messaging a bunch of Sarahs who all happened to be underage. So, creepy guy at the grocery store? Let's not meet.
When I was 12 years old, I got an unusual opportunity. I was able to be involved in a study abroad program where I would live in England for several months, from a very small town in the US originally. The program was run through my middle school, and I went over to England with a group of around 15 other 12-year-olds. Before we went to the homes we would be living in for the next few months, we ended up staying in London for about a week to do some sightseeing. When we got there, we were staying in a small hostel downtown, and my school had essentially rented out the entire hostel for the kids and for the adults that were chaperoning the trip. If I remember correctly, there were 2 adults with us. Every day, we would have a scheduled activity, and then we would have a significant amount of free time where we were allowed to explore the city as a group with just the kids and no adults. The second day we were there, my friends and I were out together, and we ended up stopping to look at some kiosks that had souvenirs. We were about a block from our hostel. I was around the backside of the kiosk. It would look like I was alone, and I feel someone grab my arm. I turn and see a middle-aged man, most likely homeless, looking at me, and he says, "Hello there, pretty little girl," in the creepiest voice I had ever heard. I immediately darted around the other side of the kiosk back to my friends. Before I could even tell them what happened, he came around and got super close to me and said, "You can run. You can hide. But I will find you." And then he walked away. I immediately grabbed my friend and started pulling her back towards the direction of our hostel. I was crying when we got back there and told our chaperones what happened. They essentially brushed it off and didn't do anything. Every day we were in London from then on, I would see him 1 to 3 times a day when we were out. He would never get close and never say anything, but he would always be smiling while watching me. Every time I would see him, I would point him out to either one of the chaperones or another kid in our group. On the last day we were there, we were getting ready to leave, and we were catching a train from London to Leeds. While we were waiting at the train platform, I hear, "Bye, little girl. I will see you soon." And I turn around and sure enough, he's there. He quickly leaves, and again, no one in my group really does anything. Except for the other kids. They were all completely freaked out. I never saw him again after seeing him on the train platform, but I still remember his voice. Every time I think of it, I get a shiver down my spine and think about how close to danger I was.
I seem to be a magnet for creeps and weirdos, and since I got such a positive response on my last experience, I figured I would share a few more with you all. I'll be writing in order of Let's Not Meetness, so scroll to the end if you only want the scariest. Background: these all took place outside my home at that time, which was on the literal last block of a major city, right across the street from a beach. The building was framed on 4 sides by the beach, the woods, a construction site, and a few other sleepy houses, as well as a muni line. Think of the subway, but above the ground. It's the very last stop of the muni line, so unless you catch it the right time of day, or at the height of tourist season, the area is basically empty on the sidewalks. The house itself has an initial patio door, which doesn't always fully close if you don't slam it, and then an entry area with a staircase and leading up to the second locked door that leads to the apartment. Experience number 1. I get home from work one day at about 9 p.m. and immediately get into a small spat with my roommates. After about 30 minutes, I decide to leave the house to cool off. I had planned on sitting on the porch outside, but as I looked across the street at the ocean, I decided it would be more peaceful there. I had never been to the beach at night for safety, but as I looked at the well-lit parking lot and no one in sight, I decided it would be all right. In the 1-block span from the beach to my home, there was a little wooded path that started on my street and dumped you out at the crosswalk for the beach. It also intersected with another pathway that took you down the coast. I sat for a bit. Everything was fine, and after a while, I started the 1-minute walk back on the little path. All of a sudden, I look up and see a man walking briskly on the intersecting path, looking right at me. I sped up a bit and tried to ignore him, and as we hit the section where the two paths intersect, I end up being about a foot away from him, and he calls out to me, "Hey, I want to talk to you." I ignore him, and after a few more steps, he reaches out his hand and grabs part of my hair, saying, "Hey, come here." I immediately yank my hair out of his hand and book at the last block, sprinting to my house, and I can hear him running behind me. I turn the corner sharply and am briefly out of his sight. Luckily, the initial entryway to the patio had been left open by accident, and I run in through the door and slam it shut. I hear his footsteps stop outside, and followed by silence. As I go upstairs and look through our front window, I saw him walking away into the construction site. Experience number 2. I had a friend that lived a couple blocks from where I was, along the same stretch of the beach. After hanging out one day, I decided to head back home around sunset. I've walked this route many times, and it's just barely light outside still. Only a 5-minute walk, so I figure, and I'll be home before dark. As I cross the intersection from their house, I notice a white van parked on the corner that is not usually there. It's covering a little garden that I like to look at on my way back. I can just barely make out 2 people in the front seat. I think, odd. Well, okay, whatever, and pull out my pepper spray. I cross the street, passing the van, and now have my back to it. And as soon as my foot hits the pavement on the other side of the street, I hear the van start up. I turn my head just slightly and see them illegally turning on the street where I am now walking. They creep the van beside me slowly, just behind me within my peripheral vision. I decide to stop and let them pass. I pause and pretend to be looking at my phone and see them stop driving immediately. This was a nope from me, and I broke into a run, the van following me, to a small vintage motel about 1 building away that I know has an open entrance courtyard. And so, as I approached it, I turn quickly into the yard and run up to the archway entry for a unit. I stop at the first few steps, catching my breath, and I open my phone front camera to use as a sort of mirror to see what the van was doing. They head back up to the entry of the motel and sat there for a few minutes. Then, the one on the passenger side opened the door and started walking towards the motel, his phone flashlight on, and I immediately pulled my own phone back, listening for his footsteps and readying myself to start banging on the motel door, hoping someone is inside. I wait in silence for a long time, long enough for it to get dark. I finally look out again, and both the man and van are gone. I call an Uber to take me the last 2 blocks, and never saw them again. Experience number 3. I have a friend over, and we wanted to dab. It's a form of smoking weed. It's about 10 p.m., and my roommates don't like dabbing in the house because of the smell, so he and I go to his car parked out front. We were in there, having a good time, when I noticed a person walking down the block, pulling on car door handles. I notify him, and we watch as that same person comes up to his car and yanks on his back door. He honks his horn and back up for a minute, then walk to his driver window and knock on the window, making a motion to roll it down. Just as I'm about to tell him don't, he rolls down the window a bit. The person is clean and normally clothed and asks what day it is, and then what time it is, to which my friend answers. They then stand there and stare at us as he tries to usher them away, even offering them money. But without saying anything, they walk away down the block, and once they reach the intersection between the construction site and the woods, they roll their head back up to the sky and start screaming at the top of their lungs as they back away out of sight. I take this opportunity to dart back inside my house as my friend watches, making sure to close the patio door. A few hours later, one of my roommates comes home very drunk, and as we figured later, they failed to make sure that the patio door shut all the way. Morning time comes, and I wake up in an empty apartment. I open my phone, and I have a singular message from my roommate from 3 hours ago, stating that when they left for work this morning, there was a person they didn't know sleeping inside the patio area. They thought it was a drunk person who lived in the neighborhood and entered the wrong house by mistake, and evidently did not find it enough of a reason to call or wake me up. I immediately go to the entry of our apartment, pulling the door open fast, and to my surprise, the person who had been talking to us in the car that night before is laying casually across my staircase, fiddling with something. I scream, "Hey!" loudly, and they immediately hop up and run out my patio door. I run down the stairs after them and open the door. They are standing across the street, just smiling at me and giggling. They then give me a little wave and run off. I close the door hard and go back up the steps to see what items they had left. Sitting on the steps was a few coins, some weird wire-type objects, I think a bobby pin after you bent it into a straight line, a lighter, and a pocket knife. And I never saw them again. Unrelated to my stories, but shortly after I moved from that area, number 1, a teenage girl was abducted from the same corner where I saw the van. Number 2, after a car chase, police found a severed head in the freezer of a house along my block as well. I also got a lot of questions regarding calling 911 on my last post and wanted to clarify that I am from a rural area and have had many bad experiences with cops abusing power, and have been raised to always be wary of the police. I've also had situations that were severe enough that I did need to call them, and they didn't help me. So that is not really a thought that goes through my head when dealing with these type of situations, and I've learned how to take care of myself or utilize community resources for other situations. These all happened years ago, and it's pretty wild to look back on. I remember how terrified I felt in these times. So there's my stories, and I hope you all enjoyed.
This story is quite short and fairly uneventful. but I still felt that it was weird, and felt like sharing. I went to an abandoned mill today with my two friends, Haley and Kennedy. It overlooks a man-made dam across a large river and has many areas that cannot be seen from the main road. I've been here several times before, and although I've encountered other people, it's usually those my age who have just come to smoke or spray paint or even fish. Today, we noticed there's a truck parked by the dam. Kinda weird, as most people just walk from the road, but I didn't really question it. I noticed the windshield wipers are on, and figured they're about to leave. We walked down a hill to a building that continues to some rocks that overlook the river. Within a few minutes, the man from the truck has walked down to the sand by the river and can obviously see us above him and knows we see him. I noticed that there was something in his hand, but don't question it. We honestly are just really wanting to smoke and wait for him to leave. Eventually he leaves the sandy area, and I ask Haley to check and see where he has gone. I'm having a hard time explaining the layout, but I can essentially see Haley from where I'm standing by the rocks, and I see her wave to someone. She comes back and says the guy has a hacksaw, is very close to where we are, and showed no expression towards her. Maybe it's all of those true crime stories I've heard and my experience as a woman, but I suddenly feel very uncomfortable. If the guy were to walk closer to us, we would have no option but to move past him. In front of us is the rocks leading straight to the dam and river, which must be roughly 150 feet drop at least. I don't want to assume he has bad intentions, but I mean, he has a fucking hacksaw. Although I'm weirded out, I don't feel afraid for my safety at this point. We continue walking around the mill and very quickly notice he seems to be following us. He never stays too close to us, but certainly close enough to keep an eye on us. This place is pretty big, and I know there's no way it's a coincidence. He's by himself and isn't fishing or doing anything. He's just walking around swinging his hacksaw like a circus clown. I notice him looking at us a lot too. It's also important to note that it's really cold and rainy, so the ground is quite muddy. I couldn't help but note that this would make it harder to run if something were to happen. Eventually, we're all really creeped out. We decide to leave, but exit the mill in a different direction than we entered. Before we start walking, I notice he is in the direction of where we originally entered. We have to walk up a muddy hill that's maybe a quarter of a mile to get to the main road, which is already in a pretty isolated area. As we're unpacking this strange situation, I glance behind me and I notice that hacksaw guy is way too close for comfort and is walking faster than he had been. We pick up the pace as well and thankfully make it to my car, which is parked right at the exit. I still don't know what this guy was doing, but it rattled my friends and I quite a bit. I know he wasn't patrolling the area, as he would have just told us to leave if he was. My imagination sure can come up with a few scenarios, though. So, creepy guy with a hacksaw who followed my friends and I at an abandoned mill. Let's not meet.
This happened to me a few days ago, and I wanted to chronicle everything before I forgot any details. It's a little long, so bear with me. I work at a popular retail store in a mall close to my on-campus apartment. I was home for Christmas break and decided to work Christmas Eve since I was promised time and a half and I could use the money to buy some extra Christmas presents. My childhood home is not very far from my apartment, but it's about an hour drive from my work to my childhood home. Our holiday hours were extended this year, and I was given a closing shift for Christmas Eve. The store closed at 10 p.m. and the closing shift ended at 10:30, meaning that I would be getting home around midnight after swinging through a drive-thru to grab something to eat. The closing shift at a store usually had 2 employees and a manager working, but the other employee that was supposed to close with me was out sick, so it was just me and the manager. While the manager emptied and counted the cash drawers, I wrote the daily report. I gathered up all the trash and cardboard and left it all by the back door in the stockroom. I dusted and vacuumed until the manager was finished with the daily report, and then he put in the combination to disable the alarm and held open the back door for me to take the trash and the cardboard. This was the part that was usually the most helpful, to have 2 employees instead of 1, because the dumpster was walled off and the manager had to wait by the door to make sure no one walked into the store. But the dumpster wasn't too far away, and I wanted to get home as soon as possible, so I carried all the trash out. Our store shared the dumpster with only 3 other stores, all of which closed either before us or after us, so I wasn't expecting to see anyone at the dumpster. I was so startled that I dropped my bags when I saw someone digging through the trash. He looked up at me when he heard the bags fall. "Oh, hi. I dropped my wallet in the trash. Could you help me grab it?" he asked. 1,000 red flags went off in my brain, and I immediately began to back away. I don't think I can. I need to take out the trash and get back to my store," I said, trying to walk towards the store slowly. "Oh, which store do you work at?" he asked. I'm not sure why I told him, but I told him the store I worked at, and he nodded. "Oh, nice store. You can just leave the bags here. I'll toss them when I'm done looking." I went back into the store at that point, a little creeped out, but not suspecting anything else. I told my boss what happened, and he laughed a little and offered to walk me to my car, as I was parked in the lot behind the store, and he was parked in the parking garage attached to the main mall. I declined and walked to the nearly empty parking lot. There were only 3 cars in the parking lot, including mine. 1 car was parked close to the back entrance of a neighboring restaurant, and the other car was just parked a few spots away from mine. I couldn't see the person inside, but the car was on, and looked like the person was trying to warm up the car from the inside before scraping off the ice on the windshield. I glanced at the car a few times, just to mentally jot down the make and model of the car. It was a blue Honda Accord. Before getting into my car and locking the doors, I called my parents to let them know that I was just now leaving and that I would be stopping to grab dinner on the way home, so not to wait up for me. I kept my eyes peeled for the different fast food joints on the side of the highway, but the majority of them were closed at 11 p.m. on Christmas Eve. I was getting hungrier and hungrier as I got closer and closer to the exit for my house. I had decided to just scrounge up some leftovers at home, and as I drove through my town, when I saw a subway with blinking lights that said, "Open late." I peeled into the parking lot of the subway and saw the red light sign indicating that it was open. I walked into the sandwich shop and took a look around as it looked pretty empty. I called out to the empty store and was able to get the attention of the only person working in the store. "I thought I locked that door. We just closed," he said. "Come on, man. I just got off work and I just want to grab something to eat before I go to bed. I'll be really quick, I promise," I begged him. He sighed and agreed, probably taking pity on how exhausted I looked. We talked for a little bit about working the late shift on Christmas Eve as he made my sandwich before a group of teenage boys walked into the store. "We're closed, guys. I'm going to lock the store after I'm done making her sandwich," he said. "Ugh, "But I want a sandwich," one of the boys whined. Fine. The subway employee got out from behind the counter and locked the door so no one else would be able to get in, and he could ensure that the teenagers would be his last customers of the night. He finished making my sandwich and left me to pick out my drink and chips at the soda fountain. Most of the boys only bought bags of chips or cookies, so they were all finished before I finished filling up my soda, and the subway employee disappeared into the back. I put the lid to my cup on and was looking for a straw when something caught my eye. The man from the dumpster was waiting in the parking lot next to my car. He was sitting on the hood of the car that was parked next to mine. It was the blue Honda Accord. I really started to freak out at that point. There was no reason for this guy to be in my town, an hour away from the mall, at the exact place I decided to stop, if he wasn't following me. And what was he doing on the hood of his car? It was the day before Christmas. It was snowing and below 30 degrees. "Hey, can you guys walk me to my car?" I asked a group of boys. "Yeah, you alright?" one of the boys asked. "Oh, I'm fine. I just don't want to slip on any ice." I lied. I felt a little silly because there was probably a perfectly good reason for the man from the dumpster to be in the parking lot, something that didn't have anything to do with me, but I was still nervous. The boys walked me to my car and waited until I drove off. The man didn't even look at me as I got into my car. I had about 10 minutes until I got to my house, and I tried to shake the weird feeling I got about this man in the dumpster. It took me a while to notice, but I realized that there was someone following me. It was hard to see because the car's lights were off, but I noticed the car when I glanced in my rearview mirror as I drove under a street lamp. I started to get nervous again and drove past my house and turned back onto the main road, hoping that I would lose this guy. This car stayed on my tail, and I watched in my rearview mirror as he went under a streetlight again. It was a blue Honda Accord. I pulled out my phone and called 911 and explained the situation to the dispatcher. The dispatcher advised me to drive to the nearest police station and told me that she would inform the police station of what was going on. I stayed on the line with the dispatcher until I pulled into the police station, and the Honda Accord drove past the station. There was a police car waiting outside the station that drove after the guy, but ultimately there was nothing they could do besides give him a ticket for driving with his lights off. My description of the man by the dumpster matched the driver of the Accord. I don't know what he planned, but I haven't seen him since and told my boss about the incident so that I won't have to take the trash out on my own anymore. So, to the man who followed me for over an hour on Christmas Eve, let's not meet again. Hi, thanks for watching the video. I really appreciate it. If you want to send me a story to read, feel free to do so. My email is in the description of the video. And if you want to follow me on my social media, just to get updates or maybe to talk, the links and info for my Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram accounts are also in the description. And finally, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And turn that bell on to be notified for upcoming surprises. And remember, your fear feeds me.